I've already put it up. Okay. Out of 131 teams in FBS football, chat room answers only, how many of the 131 programs have a 500 or better, you just saw part of a graphic, 500 or better record against teams in the last 10 years ranked in the top 10? How many?
So specific. So how many of 131's records against top 10 teams in the last 10 years? Did I hear that right?
How many of the 131 teams in college football, FBS, have a winning record against since 2014 against teams ranked inside the top 10?
I don't know, like 25?
Top 25. No, not that many. Brett said 1, Roger said 4. Come on, guys. Go Black 45-11, very close. Brett, Mike 2 and 2. Go ahead. This is it. That's the list. There are 10 teams in FBS football who have a record of 500, or in this case, above 500 record against teams that were ranked. Ranked. Look how dominant Alabama. We knew that. Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, most of that in the last 3 to 4 years. Oklahoma and wet blankets, wet dream. Oklahoma State right there at number 6. Very competitive. LSU.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. LSU, I almost let that go, and I couldn't.
Washington. Hey, look at TCU. You know, Patterson won some big games, and, of course, then they had the team 2 years ago, and then Oregon at number 10. There's a lot of alphas that are not on that list, and we'll get to them in just a second.
Well, a lot of the alphas on that, like Michigan's not on the list because – the years of 2014 to about 2018, 2019 were kind of bleh.
Well, they just couldn't, but they couldn't beat Ohio State.
But also the Big Ten quite often doesn't have a lot of ranked teams in it.
Florida State, Texas, who are hot now, this is part of their doldrums, so they're not on this list either. But there we are. Those are the only out of 131 schools that have a winning record against ranked opponents since 2014.
Well, and it's hard for, 70 of those schools to get many when they don't really play against ranked teams a lot because those teams don't get any respect in the top 25 poll. When it's just like, who do we put for the group of 5? Tulane's good. They're going to 22. That's what you get. SMU, they're good. 21.
Yep.
I mean, that's so you're eliminating half the field because they don't even get the opportunity to play very many of those games. But, I mean, yeah, if I had to guess, 7 of these teams are Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, I mean, I'm surprised and yet not. I wouldn't have guessed Oklahoma State, but I'm not surprised to see them on there. TCU, I'm not surprised to see them on there given the run that they've had. And, I mean, all those seem to jive and make sense. And you know what? Alabama, as good as they've had it, I don't care how good of a coach Kalen DeBoer is. I just have a hard time seeing, especially with the way the conferences have realigned, of another run like 54-13. But, man, if he can duplicate that, then by God, they got themselves the next Saban, potentially. I guess the maddening thing would be to be one of these teams towards the top that hasn't won really anything of any substance. I mean, that would be really maddening. I mean, you got national champion. Ohio State, I know, has been – I mean, they've got their titles, but they've been waiting for a little while now. And then to watch Michigan go and win it this year, that's why the pressure's creeping up on Ryan Day. Because at a certain point, you can win big games, but if it's not the right big games at the end, then it doesn't matter as much.
4 or 5 games around the country, rivalries that you can be really good, but if you lose too many of those in a row. So, Florida State, 12-24. Now, this is during a bubble where they after Jameis left, right?
No, I experienced all 24 of those bastards.
Notre Dame, 23-24. A&M, 17-27, which is somewhat respectable when you look at the entire list. Texas, 19-29. USC, 17-28. Nebraska, 2-30.
I can believe that. Yeah.
You want to just go home now?
I don't even know the 2.
Yeah.
I think they upset Ohio State when they had Barrett at quarterback one year when they somehow won the game in Lincoln. And Rex Burkhead was on that team. Rutgers, 0-34. Only team on the list that I saw.
But let's not pick on.
They're in the New York, New Jersey metro.
But let's not. Also, here's the thing. And if you're a Rutgers fan, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. But when you say, why do you guys always pick on Rutgers? That's why.
Yeah. Vanderbilt, 3-35. There's others that are.
Don't pick on Vandy.
Yeah.
Don't. We've done it enough.
That's
Illinois.
a very respectable record for the Commodores, given what's at their disposal.
Illinois is 2-24. So I'm throwing out some of the names and some of the records of teams. Here's the rest of the Big 12. Just can glance at this. Arizona, again, like 15-25 is pretty good. So if you're in that neighborhood where you're at 11-23, you're not like really far down the list. Arizona State, Baylor, there's BYU, Cincinnati. They haven't played as many because, again, they were in a conference, American Conference, and a lot of those teams weren't given the opportunity to be ranked. Colorado, Houston, not bad. They've only played 24 of those games. Iowa State, KU, Kansas State.
That's a
I
lot of
thought
teams
K-State
under
would be
500.
better. Oh, no.
KU at 2-34 just shows you how in the dark that team was pre-Lance Leipold.
Yep. Texas Tech.
That was, 2 wins over Texas?
Yeah. No.
Well, one of them was
One
that
of them
Texas
for
would have
sure.
been ranked, but one of them would have been, yeah.
Texas Tech is very down on that number, 5-34. I thought they, probably a couple of those were probably against Texas because they'll rally up against them.
Well,
UCF
they beat Oklahoma a couple years ago and
Yep.
beat Texas. They had the grand sweep of those two with close victory. Bijan fumbled in the start of overtime.
Yeah.
Or no. Dylan Gabriel fumbled at the start of overtime. And
on the flea flicker, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact sequence of it. But Bijan fumbled, which he never did, down the goal line. And then Gabriel fumbled. And so, that was a big
There's two of them.
pair of wins. But, that's not surprising. I mean, they haven't been – I mean, look, when you talk about, why some leagues are talked about the way that they are, this is it right here. You got to beat the best teams. And you got to beat top 25 teams. And that's not what anybody's been able to do successfully, consistently for very long outside of, the teams like an Oklahoma or an Oklahoma State. The maddening thing with Oklahoma State is they haven't been able to turn it into anything more substantial than just being consistently very good. And that's what you're hoping now with the Sooners and the Longhorns potentially out of the way, that, you can on occasion hop over Kansas State or just beat K-State or beat whoever and win that Big 12 title and start to stack those and get into the playoff and maybe get some of those wins.
Yep.
But that's the part where they've been very good, very consistent, but they haven't been going and grabbing that elite level often enough to really, make it into more than what it has been.
What was it, 11 when they were on the cusp of playing? Was it 11 when they had a hell of a team and they lost a game at the end that knocked them out? Those are all the Big 12 teams, and I mentioned some of the others. Justin R., hey, you can't really say that about Cincinnati. The American Conference always had some ranked teams, but they had a horrible period at Cincinnati with Tommy Tuberville before Luke Fickell arrived. So there you are with that.
Yeah, more or less poking at the fact that, that you don't get a lot of teams in there all at once. It's very selective, and they're normally tucked towards the end. Now, Cincinnati, the particular playoff year, that was a different story when they were going undefeated. People eventually had to recognize them and replace them respectfully in the upper tier of the rankings. But and obviously they got their playoff spot. But for the most part, I mean, go look at the top 25 polls. You're going to get your AAC team. They're going to be at 21 or 22. And then there maybe is a second team in there. But for the most part, they're tucked away at the end, and they're just sort of interchangeable. It's Tulane's that team now. Oh, well, now it was SMU now. And then, now it won't be SMU. It'll be somebody else. Or it was Houston with Tom Herman there for a little while. So, yeah, they had opportunities. Point being, they just didn't have as many opportunities for those types of wins as teams in those other conferences that have more teams ranked each week throughout the year.
Kim goes, I'm not surprised a bit by Tech's record. We were like Moses wandering around, lost in the desert after they fired Mike Leach.
Yeah.
They weren't very good. And I think there's this feeling because the fan base is so loud and they're so supportive and everything that that's why sort of this feeling of Tech's a little bit of a sleeping giant because you feel like everything's there to be good, but they just really haven't been that.
Well, the excuse is the geography, which I don't think works.
Well, they don't use that as an excuse. That's everybody else saying that.
But that's everybody else saying that.
Yeah.
No matter what. No, they've got everything else going for them. They just didn't have the right guys. I mean, it was Tuberville and then Wells and Kingsbury, and they went through all that. By the way, you can read that comment on Tommy Tuberville in Cincinnati in my new book, Tommy Tuberville, Disappointing.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we need to break.